Are all white people racist? Well, what's the answer to that? Yes and no, I think. Is the West a white supremacist society? Yes and no. Is the US structurally racist? Yes and no. Is gender fluid? Yes and no. Are all men sexist? Yes and no. And I believe the yes and no answers to both of those. And so let's start with this racism issue. So one of the things I kind of outlined in Maps of Meaning, I think, is that there are two sources of virulent racism. And one is universal, as far as I can tell, looking at the anthropological literature. So one of the things you see that's characteristic of human societies, regardless of their size and location, is that there's a strong proclivity for the members of those societies to regard those within the society as human. This is particularly true of you can particularly see this in isolated tribes, as human, and all other humans that aren't in the tribal group as not human. And that's really, it seems really deeply rooted. And so you even see it in chimpanzees, our closest biological relatives. So the chimps arrange themselves so that they can function within their own troop, let's say, without tearing each other into pieces except on occasion. But the chimps will send raiding parties of males around the boundaries, essentially, and if they encounter non-chimp chimps, foreigners, let's say, even if they were once part of that troop and had moved, if they outnumber them, they'll often tear them to pieces. And that was discovered in the 1970s, and it was a major discovery because it showed how deeply rooted this in-group, out-group differentiation is, that it manifests itself even in our closest animal relative. And so if you say, are all white people racist? The answer to that is probably yes. But the corollary is, well, that's probably true of all people. And so it's the problem with the proposal that all white people are racist is that the fact that a skin color is listed in the proposition, it's a political move, and it decreases, it underplays the critical severity of the problem.
Yes.
Right? Like if it's just white people, that's not a big problem. But if it's all people, and even our closest relatives, it's like, man, we've got something to overcome. And then this is more relevant to what you said, I would say, is given that intrinsic in-group preference and out-group hatred that could easily be kindled, and that might be there like deep and even from the beginning, are there ways that we act as individuals that make that more and less likely? And that has more to do, I think, with the psychological development issue that you were describing. So if I'm bitter and unhappy and resentful and arrogant and hostile, then that proclivity to derogate out-group members is going to be extremely attractive to me. And so if I get my own house in order, well, then I'm less likely to need a target for my unexamined malevolence and violence, and more likely to be able to get that intrinsic in-group, out-group differentiation under some modicum of control.